Rita, our official photographer.
I'll make it there. How far? She's just next door.
Saying, Rita and I are the official photographers this evening. So.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It means, hope you get anything that's worth it.
We're really involved.
What?
I would have the Patagonia jacket.
I might do like a little sweater.
Shaking a little, but.
Hey everyone.
Using the same microphones.
Michael Sharp is going to begin. Thanks.
Welcome to the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District's special board meeting on Friday. This meeting is being fed live off the internet, so if there is no mail service right now, or our mail service provider is down, so they won't be able to comment, but we appreciate your participation either way. There were 3 positions for director of the district to be filled at the district election to be held on November 5th, 2013. The only persons who filed declarations of candidacy were the incumbent board members. Therefore, the Board of Supervisors of the County of Alpine appointed Peter Dornberg, Bob Epstein, and Eric Rickard for director positions commencing December 6th, 2013, and expiring on December 1st, 2017. At this time, I will give that oath of office. Please stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Epstein,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California,
to the Constitution of the United States and to the Constitution of the State of California,
and that I take this obligation freely,
and that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
I will now call this meeting to order. This is the special meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District for Friday, December 13th, 2013. The time is 3:35 in the afternoon. Rena, do you have any other announcements?
No, I don't.
Peter, may we have the roll call?
Ray? Here. Andy?
Here.
Rickard?
Here.
Norberg here. And Epstein? Epstein here. All present and accounted for.
Thank you. We now move to oral communications. This is an opportunity for people in the audience to talk about anything you'd like to talk about, particularly anything that's not on the agenda. Seeing no one, we'll move on to corrections to the agenda or consent calendar. Michael, I believe you have a...
Yes, I'd like to pull consent agenda number 3. We're not ready.
Okay, and I know that this is going to be a tight meeting, so whoever the new president is going to be managing the meeting tightly, and I know some agenda items may be deferred as we get to those points. Okay, so we now move to the adoption of the consent calendar. I'd like to entertain a motion to adopt the consent calendar.
I move to adopt. I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the consent calendar is adopted. We now move to item 9, new and unfinished business. The first item is the election of board officer positions, president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and assistant secretary. Michael, do you have anything to introduce this with?
No, every 2 years, the board typically goes through and appoints officers as it sees fit, so.
And I'd just like to make a brief statement that it's my belief that officers of a board of an institution like this should rotate and not stay on for lengthy periods of time except for under probably unusual circumstances. So with that, I would just like to ask if anyone would like to make nominations for any one of the positions or for the slate.
And I'd like the opportunity to do that, please. And I would like to, with your indulgence, recommend a slate as I did 2 years ago. I think that kind of gives a pattern so we can all talk about it. Pattern, we're happy with it. And I certainly want to thank you for 2 years of service as the president. And I'll get even for railroading me into taking this job later, but that's different. And respecting the fact that you want to do, as you described, and have a rotation take place, then we should pick someone else to be on the slate. And you know, as I look at the challenges that we're going to face over the next couple of years, I think there's a lot that has to do with the finances coming out correctly, how we're doing draws of money, how we're doing our expenditures, how we're doing rate setting, and I think playing to our strength with the people that are the financial experts makes a lot of sense to me. And with that in mind, I'd like to nominate for president Standish O'Grady. Standish, of course, has been the treasurer, and we need another strong financial player to step in to do that duty. And I would like to nominate Bob Epstein as the treasurer. The secretary has been your role, and I think that fit my slate nicely. I would like to volunteer to continue as the vice president at the discretion of the potential new president, of course. And Eric, I think that the assistant secretary position you would logically take as this pattern was employed. So that's my nomination.
Thanks, Bob. Is there a second to this motion in nominations?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, seconded by Peter. Would anyone like to propose any amendments to that set of nominations?
You really want to give us a chance?
Seeing none. All in favor of the nominations as motioned and seconded, say aye.
Aye. Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Don't forget your name tags.
Gosh, it's like top of the
Welcome to the conference call. Please input your access code followed by the pound key. At the tone, please record your name for announcement to the call organizer and then press the pound key to enter your conference.
Kirkwood Meadows, PUD.
You will now enter the conference. The subscriber has not yet arrived at the conference call. If you are the subscriber, please press the star key now. Please enter your subscriber PIN followed by the pound sign.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for rating.
So with that, Eric, thank you very much for 2 great years of leadership. I think both the district and the board and the management team made a lot of progress during that period. And I only hope I can partially fill in your shoes. And I'm told that the most important topic today is to finish by 5:30 because it's a bad board and a bad president that stand between the district and its holiday party. So Michael's given me surprisingly detailed notes on his suggestion for running this meeting, which we'll start with item 9B. 2 years ago, we set, and the topic, the agenda item is annual review and possible changes to board and community member positions on the district's committee and review of possible changes to District Policy 140, committees and related charters. And 2 years ago, we set up 5 new committees, or 5 committees: planning, finance, operations, capital, communications. And I think Michael and I felt 2 years into it that it would be a good opportunity to look at what still made sense and what we could consolidate and who should be on which committees. And so I think with that, you have a PowerPoint presentation you
I
want to go
do.
through?
I have a few statements. Back in 2011, just 2 years ago, the district had 13 committees and were comprised by 100% board members. Very infrequently, a community member would be asked to participate. The committees, with the exception of the fire committee, would meet rarely, with nearly all the involvement in action being handled at the board level. Suddenly, with the acquisition of Mountain Utilities and the pursuit of the Out Valley project, the district found itself in the need of quality professional help. With the direction of the planning committee, and particularly Jeff Smith, the committee structure was downsized to 5 committees, which all meet on a monthly basis. High-quality committee members were encouraged to join, and to all the committees were full membership. The results have been truly unmistakably successful, with the district reaching new heights of transparency and action, thanks to the commitment and dedication of the board and the committee members. Today, the district would like to say thank you.
Thank you. Sure. So the first committee we want to talk about is planning, which currently has Bob as chairman and Eric as a member, as well as community members Jeff Smith, Cheryl Stern, and Sid Long. And I think we're proposing no changes to that. Is that correct? And finance currently consists of me as chairman, Bob as the other board member, and very active community members in the form of Alan Sapp, who you all know, and Mark Duvall, who you probably don't know that well, but he's been a real contributor, as well as Casey representing Vail. And I think what we're proposing to do here is just switch Bob Epstein into chairman, and I'd continue as the second board member. So operations and capital projects we're proposing to consolidate. Luckily, Peter has been, I think, the chairman of both of them.
Right.
So it would be the logical chairman continuing forward. And we have 4, Eric would probably be the logical second member. And then we had 5 community members who participated in those committees, one of whom has resigned, Chuck Swanson. So our proposal is to have the 4 community members participate on this merged committee. And communications has been Bob Epstein as chairman, and I believe Eric as the second member. And we're proposing that Bob Endy take his place and that we continue with community members Cheryl Stern, Ann Flora Perot, and Malene Smith. And finally, personnel has been Eric as president and Peter, and I'm told I should be on that since I'm the new president. And our proposals for Eric to continue. And then the wine tasting committee. This looks like the most fun. Community members are, well, Rick Ansel, who also represents the PUD, as well as Caroline Scott, Cheryl Stern, Ann O'Grady, and a new recruit in the form of Sandy Goldberg. So with that, I'd open up to the board. Any comments, questions, discussion?
I think this is a good slate. I was a little concerned about Bob having to chair 2 committees, but that's, I mean, you've been so critical to the communications committee. It seems like the logical thing to do. If that's okay with you?
It's fine with me.
Chair
Yeah.
committees.
Yeah.
I'd like to comment that I like the combination of the operations and the capital committees. I think in the operations committee, we've often, come up against the topic of, okay, so, we've got some imperfections in our offerings, we've got some inefficiencies in revenue use or whatever it is, and And then the question inevitably is, okay, so what do we do to try to improve on those situations? What investments is it reasonable to make in order to address those, if any? And I think a tighter linkage there makes logical sense to my mind.
Yeah, I think we eliminate some redundancy too, a lot of the reports with duplications.
So any comments, questions from the audience? Jeff?
Just a comment, because I see it on the agenda, but the change of committee structure would change the policy. Policy 140, because that policy had the separate committees before, so they have to be amended.
Actually, policy 140 didn't address the names of the committees. They addressed, you helped write it actually 2 years ago. It addresses the nature of a committee, being ad hoc, standing, or sets, but it doesn't actually define the committees. That's up to the president and the board.
Great, that's even better.
Must have been brilliantly written at the time.
Also, one other item on 140, since Jeff brought it up, is that we'd like to make committee membership, their terms go for 3-year terms, which are staggering, such as the board is 4-year terms, which are also staggering. That also always gives us a fresh member and a fresh revolving. But that's just a procedure.
Well, is a motion desired for the membership, the board membership, and the community membership altogether, as well as modification to policy 140?
There is no modification to 140, it would just be the membership as presented in the...
Well, if it's okay with Standish, I'd like to move that we adopt the committee structure and the membership, including the board members, as presented.
So,
I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
So that passes as recommended. 9C. I think you have an intro, Mike.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I actually gave my intro a little early just to kind of bring us into the committee. Tonight, we'd like to say thanks to our community members of the committees, and with that, we have prepared a series of resolutions for these members. We've asked as many as possible that could attend. We've got 3, so that's not bad. So, Standish, you might want to read a resolution?
Sure. Before I do, we have a series of them here. Resolution 1328 for Jeff Smith, which I'll read, and then 1324, which is identical for Gary Gallagher, and Resolution 1323, which has the same form for Caroline Scott. Resolution for 1322 for Alan Sapp, who I asked to be here but couldn't, and then Resolution 1318 for Chuck Swanson, and Resolution 1327 for Mark Duvall, and Resolution 1319 for Anne Fleur Perot, and Resolution 1320 for Malene Smith, and Resolution 1321 for Casey Bland, and Resolution 1326 for Sid Law, and Resolution 1325 for Howard Hoffman, and Resolution 1329 for Cheryl Stern. And I'm sure you'd appreciate that I don't read them all, I'll just read one for Jeff Smith. It's a resolution of the Board of Directors of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District recognizing and honoring Jeff Smith for his devoted service and outstanding contributions. Whereas Jeff Smith was appointed by the President of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District's Board of Directors to serve on the Planning Committee, and whereas Jeff Smith participated in and contributed significantly to the affairs of the district in a consistent, predictable, and fair manner, studied problems and issues within an assigned area, and provided specialized assistance and advice to the board and management team. Whereas Jeff Smith, during his public service on the Planning Committee, has masterminded the reorganization of the district's committee structure and shared his deep knowledge and experience with similar, many-faceted organizations.
And whereas Jeff Smith conveyed a great love for the district, his family, and the community, now therefore be it resolved that the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District does hereby express deep appreciation to Jeff Smith for his many hours of public service to the people of Kirkwood, California. So assuming we vote for it, passed and adopted at a regular meeting, that's probably gonna say don't read, right? Any board discussion?
I mean, Jeff, for this, but Malene and Cheryl and all the other committee members have just done a fantastic job. I mean, been really, really valuable, showing up at every meeting that I know of. And, I mean, the district just wouldn't be the same without the committee members at this point. I mean, it's, in many ways, it's defined the personality of the district, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I'd like to make the motion that we approve all those resolutions.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So why don't we ask you to come up here, Jeff? There are two others. Follow, so you won't be alone. This is a framed resolution with your name on it and a token of our appreciation. Thank you very much.
You good?
Congratulations to you. Malene, since it's a family affair, here's your resolution and another great picture. Thank you. And Cheryl, here's a framed resolution for you and another great picture. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 9D, I think you have an introduction for us, Michael, and then I think Michelle is here to present.
Dave, you're still on the line, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
This is our Out Valley update for the meeting. I just wanted to note that Russ has received an appointed administrative number to our supplemental loan. Russ has the necessary funds, this is an important point, that Russ does have the necessary funds to fund our request, and we are hoping for approval this winter so that the funds will be available by this summer. Howard Barnes is keeping a close track of that and keeping the Finance Committee apprised of our status. Today's Out Valley will come in two parts. Michelle is here who has a PowerPoint presentation, which I'll flip the pages for, and then Dave will be here to discuss the KMPUD substation layout and the status of the transformer RFP. So with that, Michelle.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate being here. It's nice to be here in the afternoon, and I've only got about 180 slides, so I think it'll only take about, an hour and 45 minutes. No.
Michelle, I apologize, but I really can't hear you at all.
Okay.
I saw that. Can you move just the mic?
How's that, Dave? Can you hear me now?
That's great.
Oh, perfect. Now, I'll be really brief. What I wanted to do was give you just a quick update of the final construction activities that took place from the last time we met in November to when the contractor demobilized a week ago. So with that, I'm going to talk a little about what we did and show you some pictures and then take some questions. So go ahead, Michael. At the last meeting, we were not optimistic that we were going to be able to complete any of the cable pulls here in Kirkwood. Right after that meeting, KMPUD's subcontractor Titan came to us and the stars aligned and they were able to come into Kirkwood and actually complete two of the complete sections of the cable pulls, from essentially the powerhouse to the second sectionalizing cabinet. And so they pulled all three cables in those first two sections. And then we had one additional section that we pulled one cable in. It was a longer section, and so they were using a capstan, and we weren't real comfortable with having a longer pole that was longer than the cable that we had on the tugger. And so we did the one cable, and then we decided to call it quits at that point and not pull the additional 2 cables and wait for next year when they have the piece of equipment that has the longer cable on it. So next. What we learned when we pulled these cables, the maximum tension allowable when we're pulling any cable was 4,000 pounds. When Exponential did their design, they had some assumptions about friction. What we found was the maximum tension recorded was just over 700 pounds, 725 pounds. That occurred at one point when we had stopped the pulling and then restarted, and so there was the significant amount of tension. Throughout most of the pulls, the tensions were in the 75 to 100 pound range. So we were very, very pleased with what we saw. We're very optimistic about the cable pulls going into next year. So we thought it was very valuable information. We're happy we were able to do that. Next. So here's just some pictures of us pulling cable. They pulled each cable individually, and then they terminated them in the cabinets. We actually were able to complete the installation of the first 2 sectionalizing cabinets. Next. So before it snowed, you probably saw these 2 cabinets, the ones right down next to the rec center and then ones around the corner from the rec center. So next. So the overhead line. We were able to finish out on the overhead line the installation of the rebar cages and the anchor bolts for structure 01, which is the one down by Salt Springs. We had that one excavated last year, but we got last meeting, but we got everything poured. The other reinforced concrete pier foundation on the 115 that we wanted to get done was for structure 1/18. We don't have the anchor bolts for that structure. They're not due to arrive until over the winter, but the contractor was able to excavate that hole. They excavated down to 10 feet. It was decomposed granite the entire way, so they opted not to go any further, and because the digging was so easy, that hole took just a matter of hours to dig. So they opted to go ahead and winterize the hole for the winter, and then they'll come back in the spring and be able to finish that hole probably in an afternoon. The other drilled pier that we had that we wanted to get excavated on the 115 was structure 1/21, which is the turn structure right before it goes into KM Green. The contractor had expressed some concerns, as did the Forest Service, with the proximity of that structure to the creek there. That's in the sensitive frog habitat. And the contractor came to us and offered to complete that foundation as a micropile as opposed to a reinforced concrete pier for the same price. And so we as a team discussed it, and we gave the recommendation to go ahead and make that change. So they did not excavate for that, and they will complete that with the micropiles that they do in May of 2014. Next. So here's just some pictures of them putting in the rebar cages and the anchor bolts. This is actually for structure 0/1 down by Salt Springs. And so the 34.5 overhead line. For the reinforced concrete piers, we completely excavated and installed the rebar cages and anchor bolts and poured concrete for structures 2, 21, 20, 22, 35, and 37. We have structure number 1, which is by the substation. It's the first structure coming out of the substation. We've excavated that, but the anchor bolts for that were tied up with the anchor bolts for structure 1/18, so those were not on site, so they've just winterized that hole. Structure 36 was due to be, it's the one that's second pole up from Bear River Reservoir, really challenging terrain. The contractor was very concerned about the access corridor that they would need to construct to get into that structure. The Forest Service was as well. We came up with an access corridor that was agreeable to everyone, but the contractor was still a little apprehensive. They came back and asked if we could also switch that one to a micropile, which they'll be able to construct using helicopters. We talked with the Forest Service because our concern is that one falls within the Spotted Owl LOP area. But it's on that slope going up from Bear River Reservoir, so there's hardly any trees in that area. And in talking with the Forest Service, we'll be doing a site-specific survey of trees within a quarter mile of that structure prior to the micropile constructor or contractor coming on site. And we are very confident that we're not going to find any owls because there aren't any trees for them to nest in that area. So 36 is going to be constructed as a micropile in May of next year. Structures 31, 32, and 33 are direct embed structures, and I'll talk more about those in just a minute. Those are structures that were all excavated. Those were all in essentially rock from within 2 feet of the surface all the way down to the final excavation depth of about 8.5 feet. So those are the structures and excavations that we completed before the snow got too deep and the roads got too nasty up there that we couldn't continue working. So next. So here's just some pictures very similar of what you'd see if you were up there, the anchor bolt or the rebar cage, everything formed, and then the concrete pier cap being poured. Next. Now with the 34.5 overhead line, the concern is the number of direct embed excavations that we need to complete in a very short amount of time within the Spotted Owl LOP. So Wilson Construction went through and they augured one of the holes that we didn't have access to. So they augured every single hole that we're going to do as a direct embed next year. From the information that auguring told us is we knew what sort of soil conditions exactly at each site that we were going to be encountering. From that information, we were able to prioritize the holes that the order in which they're going to get excavated. That's why 31, 32, and 33 were excavated this year because those are in rock. So they got those out of the way. They're the ones that take the longest to drill. What we found is there's about 5 additional holes where we're going to hit rock at a certain depth. So it's likely that we're going to have at least 3 feet of rock excavation in each one of those holes. They're going to take longer to drill, but when I'm talking longer, those are probably 2.5 to 3 day max drilling of the holes. The balance of the holes are in soil and cobble, and based on what we experienced this year, those holes will probably take anywhere from 2 hours to about a half a day to drill. So they'll be going very quickly. So we feel very confident with the information that we gathered through the auguring, that we have a very good plan and we know generally what we're going to encounter. The excavation for the direct embeds are 4-foot diameter augers as opposed to the 4 and then the 6-foot diameter auger that we were doing for the reinforced concrete piers. So it's a much more streamlined and a much quicker process than we encountered for some of the drilled piers.
Michelle, there's no reason that, I assume that there's no reason that a lot of other work, the installation of the poles themselves and so on can't be going on while these few holes are being.
That's exactly, and that's one of the things I wanted to touch on. What Wilson's plan is well, if you don't mind waiting just a second, I'll get into that when I talk about the construction schedule. So here's just a couple pictures of the auger and then the starting of some of the holes, some of the direct embed holes. You can see the weather conditions changing as we're going. Here's one of the rock holes. And then go ahead next, Michael. And then what we've done, any of the holes that we excavated that didn't have a foundation poured, we've winterized them. There's been a steel plate placed over the top of that hole, and then we've marked them with snow pole markers. So you can see these, if you're out there, there's white poles with orange tips on them to let any recreationalists in the area know that there's an obstruction there. So the 2014 construction schedule. The overhead schedule is still on track, exactly like we presented at the last meeting. So no changes there. Micropiles in May, setting towers in June and July, stringing cable. Wilson's plan is to have the entire 115 complete, including the 12 kV underbuild removed in that section by August 15th. Next. So with the 34.5, what Wilson's going to be doing is on August 15th, they will have 2 drill rigs mobilized. They will be having 1 drill rig working on many of the holes that are very simple to set, the ones that are in soil and cobble. As those holes are excavated, they will be setting the towers immediately following that. So we'll be drilling a hole and setting a tower, and drilling a hole and setting a tower. They'll have a second drill rig that's working on the holes that are a little bit more challenging, the 5 that I said that looks like we have a little bit of rock. We also have the towers that we can set on the reinforced concrete piers. Those are all ready to go for tower installation. They also have 2 additional drill rigs that are ready to be mobilized. If we get on site and after the first week of drilling in August, we realize that they're not making the progress, they have committed to bring the additional drill rigs on. We have expressed to them the necessity to meet the project schedule. And I believe that they are very committed to meeting that schedule. Based on what we saw this year, they have been very good to work with, very, very responsive. Next. So again, using 2 drill rigs with the start date of August 15th. Their schedule that they presented to me just earlier this week is a completion date of all of the excavations by September 5th. And they'll be setting towers concurrently. Once they get all of the towers set, they have a scheduled date at this point of September 27th of having all the cables strung and having the 12 kV underbuild taken out. So that leaves us the entire month of October to get all of the testing completed on that last section of line. So we feel very comfortable with that schedule at this point. Next. One last thing I'd like to mention. We continue to meet with the Forest Service, and we have sent them a letter, and we've had discussions with them about relief that they can provide us on the Spotted Owl LOP. We have asked for relief within the entire Spotted Owl LOP for the 30.5 kV line. Whether that's feasible or not, they'll have to come back and tell us, but we had to ask. If that's not feasible, we have also asked for some very select areas where we think most definitely we should be able to get relief on the Spotted Owl LOP. Whether we can gain 2 weeks of construction or a month of construction or a week of construction, anything that we can get will help ease the schedule. And the Forest Service has been very willing to have those conversations with us. The district ranger has been very supportive, and the district the Forest Service biologist has been very supportive. So with that, before I take any additional questions, I have brought Bruce Scott with me, one of the RCI principals, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd like for him just to say a couple words, and then I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Michelle, Mr. President, members of the board, members of the community. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Bruce Scott, principal of RCI. I work with Michelle. I met with you in the spring when we came up as things were beginning to gel for the year, and I wanted to come back to say hello again and to let you know that we're fully in support of Michelle and her efforts. She has done a tremendous number of things behind the scene that nobody really understands, and some of us in the office don't completely understand, as far as the hoops she's had to jump through and trying to keep all the balls in the air. And we're very proud of her, and we're proud of the job that has been done up to now. We're committed to seeing it through efficiently and effectively, and I think Michelle has done a great job. She has backup. You don't always see it, but you can certainly always inquire or ask, or we stand behind Michelle in all ways and are always able and willing to come to answer questions or to provide further information. So we just want to let the board know we very much appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Some of us, particularly Michelle, are looking forward to the winter shutdown so she can gather strength for spring. But thank you very much, and if the board has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I just really wanted to say hi and thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from board members?
I just have one. Can we do all of our construction before the underbuild has to be switched over? Or are we dependent on PG&E reconnecting the customers and having to wait for them?
We can do, and Dave could probably answer this a little more succinctly than I can, but we can do a significant amount of work on the underbuild. That's why we're looking at getting everything complete on the 115 prior to August 15th. So everything on the underbuild and all the connections, everything will be done prior to August 15th. And Dave, we're even talking about having that section of line energized, correct?
That's correct, but it's important to understand that our contract with Wilson involves installing the underbuild and making the taps to reconnect the existing services to the new underbuild. We will need PG&E as far as coordination and scheduling, but our contractor will actually physically do the work so it'll complete the final connection between the new underbuild and the cabins and the other services in the area.
Okay, and we're also removing the old poles?
Yes,
Yes, we are.
What are they made of?
they're wood,
They're wood
correct.
They
And
have to
that-
go back to PG&E.
in one piece?
It's treated as supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's toxic. right?
That is one of it is part of the contract we have with our overhead contractor. They must remove the poles.
Including what's below ground?
Correct, they can't just cut them off at ground, they have to completely remove them.
Any other questions from board members?
I think Michelle also mentioned in committee that you were going to try to coordinate power outages with PG&E because when you fly on the helicopter, there's going to be some danger having a live line there.
Correct, we have already initiated those discussions with PG&E, and we provided them our initial clearance schedule for when we're going to need outages next year. We're working with PG&E to coordinate the outages that they need for the work that they've been doing at their substations with our work, so we can minimize the number of outages. And at PG&E's direction, we are officially making that request to them in January. We've already given them that information. But what PG&E has indicated that it's kind of a first come, first served basis, and we need to make sure that our outages have been requested first, so that if PG&E has other outages on the line that we need, there's a less chance of us getting bumped from being able to have a clearance when we need it, when the contractor needs it.
Have there been any significant change order requests from any of the contractors? We've got Q&D, Wilson. I mean, significant, I mentioned.
We're working with Q&D. The most significant changes that we've seen pertain to the volcano costs. And so we've just actually sent a memorandum to Volcano totaling what their contributions were for what we've constructed in 2013. And Michael and I are reviewing the costs to the district for that additional work. The other changes that we encountered in the project, other than Volcano, we had Volcano stuff that the district will be responsible for, and we had Volcano changes that Volcano requested that we have to run through the change order process. We had some money for the crossing at Highway 88 that the district had requested, so that's included in the change order. That was about $9,000. We had an issue with some of the cable as it came in, and with having to deal with how it came from Prismium. We're in conversations with Prismium right now to get them to reimburse us for the some stoppages that Q&D had. That was about $5,000 or $6,000 worth of work that we expect to get reimbursed for. We had the utility conflicts here in Kirkwood due to unmarked utilities, which there's some that the district was responsible for, some that Volcano is responsible for, and some that Dale is going to be responsible for. And then we had the real changes in the project were things that we encountered: 2 culverts on some private property that were not marked and we didn't know about that we had to replace. We had that rocked culvert on Tragedy Springs Road that required some additional tunneling underneath it to protect that culvert.
There's nothing that's like $100,000 change order or anything like
The total will be fairly significant. I don't have that total number I can show you, but when you add all those items up, it is fairly significant, with the bulk of it due to Volcano.
Thanks.
Could we see that at the next meeting? I know that it's on the project total, at least the Volcano pieces.
Right. Those numbers, the preliminary numbers are included in the updated cost estimate that we provided. So those numbers are all accounted for there.
We'll provide a breakout at the next meeting.
That's great. Any other questions from board members? I would just, before opening up to the audience, we heard Michelle give this presentation at the Capital Projects Committee last week, and I asked the question, what are the risks? And why don't you correct me if I get them wrong? But I think that number one was, and the risk for a project not getting completed in 2014. One is an excess number of EV days. Those are days where, for air quality purposes, Wilson can't work, essentially. And then second is equipment failures. And I think, at least in my opinion, that sounds like a reasonable plan, having 2 drill rigs and 2 more. And the third is no LOP, or limited operating period relief in the Spotted Owl area. And then fourth was scheduling PG&E outages. Did I get those right, or are there any that I'm missing? Michelle, Dave?
Those are the big ones that I see. Dave?
Yeah, no, that's a good summary.
EV is for fire danger, not.
I'm sorry.
This is for clarification.
Right. At this point, I'll open up to the audience for questions or comments, suggestions. Hearing none, I guess we'll go back to the board, and there's no action required, right? And you have some comments?
Yeah. Back in the late summer of 2012, the district found itself at a crossroads. The EIR and EIS was complete, and the question was before the board as to if the district should move forward with the project and who should lead the project. The board decided to move forward and entrusted the leadership role as project manager to Michelle Gamble. You wondered why I asked Bruce to. Over the year, Michelle has done an excellent job in tirelessly representing the district and managing the project. She has a passion for our project, or she would say her project. Always upfront, always committed, always professional. Thanks, Michelle, for a job well done during our first year of construction.
Thank you very much.
I would just like to add perhaps a more colorful version of that, which is that 2 years ago, Bob and I took the oath thing, and the first thing we did is develop the financial forecast to file with RUS, and the second thing we did was revise it because Vail bought the resort before we filed it. And then in September, we got the money. And our engineer at that point, Power Engineers, told us we had been instructed to do as little work as possible in the design of this program until you got the money. And so I remember Eric asking me to attend a couple of meetings in December of last year, where essentially we got a report from Power Engineers, and without talking with each other, we came to a meeting like this, and Eric said, "What did you think?" And I said, "I thought it sounded horrible." And he said he thought it sounded worse. At which point we asked Michelle, what do you see as the plan going forward? And I remember asking you a whole bunch of pointed questions, where essentially the driving thrust behind it is, how do we know that you're any better than Power Engineers? And I'm really pleased with that report, first of all, and really pleased with the job that you've done and that RCI has done through a tumultuous year, including things like spotted owls, not to mention federal government shutdowns, which instructed the Forest Service to shut down our overhead project before it actually got going in terms of construction. So as a former professional engineer, I think the way you've handled this project and the way RCI has handled this project is great, A+. And there's just not much more I can say except that we expect continued A+ work through this time next year, hopefully a little earlier.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you. We don't have a framing resolution, but if we're done on time and on budget, we will next year.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Art?
Oh, wow, thank you. Thank you.
Don't try to ski there. Don't hurt the spotted owl.
Do you want me up here for the next one?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. Just very briefly, if I can, just say thank you. And we're proud of Michelle, and we really appreciate the opportunity and the challenge as we look forward into 2014. But we're committed to make this work, and we're here and we're accountable. So we really appreciate your support of us. Thank you.
So let's move to 9F. Do you have an introduction, or do we just go into Dave? Dave, it's yours.
Sounds like I have the floor, is that correct?
Yes.
I'm going to give a very quick description of the KMPUD substation. Are we showing the drawing, the KMPUD substation site plan up on?
It is on the board.
Thank you. You're looking at a bird's eye view of the powerhouse. As you can kind of tell, it shows the generators, the dirt room area, and the parking lot on the north side of the powerhouse. Although this is a substation, this is physically very different than the KM Green. Essentially, the KM Blue will include three major components. The installation of the transformer and reactor that you can see up in the parking lot on the north side of the powerhouse. 35 kV switchgear, which will be located inside the powerhouse dirt room. And last, a series of interconnecting cables and conduits. That is the sum total is the KM Blue substation. Referring to the equipment outside on the upper left there, the design shows a perimeter fence around the transformer reactor. However, these are not required for safety, as both devices will be arranged with no exposed live parts, similar to a typical pad mount transformer. Protective bollards can be placed around the transformer and reactor instead of the fence. Specifically regarding the reactor, Exponential Engineering continues to research the possibility of procuring a reactor that could be installed inside the 35 kV switchgear inside. If that was to happen, the switchgear lineup that you see in the drawing would extend out farther to the north, 2 or 3 cubicles possibly, and we would not have to have the one outside. By the way, that reactor that you see there is needed to offset the capacitance of the long underground cable system coming from KM Green. The transformer in the upper left, which we will be requesting an award for that contract today, will convert the voltage from the 35 kV system voltage down to the 12.5 kV level needed for the KMPUD system. This transformer will include a load tap changer, which will automatically adjust the 12.5 kV voltage up or down 10% in order to maintain the correct system voltage on the KMPUD system. Should other users of the Out Valley project tap the system upline, for example, like Caltrans up at Peddler Hill, they will then need to provide their own voltage regulation, since we have installed ours here at the KM Blue. Moving on to discuss the switchgear in the dirt room. That switchgear shown will be installed on a concrete pad and will include 2 35 kV breakers. The breakers operate in a similar fashion to the breakers we described in the KM Green substation, but they're configured to be installed in this metal switchgear. You can kind of see from the drawing, the switchgear will be oriented with the doors opening towards the back wall for safety. The 12 kV power, which will be coming out of the transformer, will be routed in new cables and conduits. And the existing switchgear over on the far right side of the drawing, to the right side of the Volvo generators, you can see the existing 12 kV switchgear. And the 2 sets of cables will be installed from the transformer into the 2 existing breakers, which were already installed specifically to connect the Out Valley to the district's electric system. That, in a nutshell, is the simple KM Blue substation. Do we have any questions about the KM Blue? And please speak up. I'm having a little trouble hearing the board.
David, it's Bob, one question. Is the conduit to route the cable already there under the floor?
No, the conduit that comes from the 12 kV switchgear comes all the way to the edge of the dirt room is installed.
Okay.
And in fact, Brandy has confirmed its location. We have photographs of that. Our contractor will only be working in the dirt room and outside in the parking lot.
Okay.
For as far as installing conduit. And he'll be pulling cable all the way over to the switchgear on the south side of the generators.
Dave, you might want to mention that the reactor might possibly be placed inside the building.
Right. I made a brief comment about that, but we are looking to see if we can get an air core reactor that would not be oil filled, that would have the size we need, but would still fit inside the switchgear. And if we did that, you would see the switchgear extend out a little bit longer, and that reactor that you see next to the transformer would go away, basically.
Staff has worked with Dave on this configuration, and we like it for several reasons. One is that it doesn't limit the access to this garage door here. We tucked it into this corner so that we could have access to the balance of the room for future work. As you can see, if you tried to place this at this location, we basically block out the door. So we wanted to put it in this location. We actually located the opening doors up against the wall for safety reasons so that people wouldn't be walking around in that area. We still have an access door. This will be a concrete pad that'll go all the way around it. So we like the configuration. We will have to move our oil storage area here, but we're thinking of possibly in this area, but that's only a matter of moving it and then piping to it. So staff is supportive of this concept.
Great. And there's enough distance in front of the overhead door between that and the transformer to maneuver what size truck to back up to that door to deliver things or to...
That's a great question. Yeah, we feel there is. There's not a huge amount of room because we had to leave enough room around the transformer for snow removal purposes. So we had to leave a full 14, 15 feet behind it for the length of our blades.
So probably, I mean, the one idea which came up one time, which I always thought was a great idea, but maybe it's not, but putting a compactor in that room and then having trucks come to take the waste away. Would there still be room for that, or would that no longer be possible?
I think this distance that you're looking at between here and here is quite a bit larger than it possibly looks on it. And yeah, I think a dump truck could back into that or pull into that area.
Just a question if you want somebody driving.
Yeah.
I appreciate trying to utilize the space, but it's the danger factor worth it.
Yeah, it becomes easier if the reactor doesn't have to be there.
Yep.
Right. Dave, I had a question about Caltrans. At KM Green, we have one of those small transformers to take it down to 220, I believe, that we talked about at the last meeting.
Yeah, that's used for our station service.
Yeah, I understand.
Lights in our control building.
Given the demand of Caltrans at their station, is it possible they could just use a collection of those, or do they have to do a reactor and the full 9 yards?
They would use something similar to what we're installing in Green. What we're installing in Green is a single phase. There would be a 3-phase. But
Okay.
theirs would look similar to a pad mount transformer you might see outside of a commercial building in the valley somewhere. About a 10-foot square green box.
Right. Okay.
Now, if the voltage regulation would be their own choice, they could try to exist with the voltage that we would be providing them. If they did need regulation, that would probably be a second green box, approximately 10 by 10.
Okay.
Any questions from the audience or comments? Well, hearing none, I don't think we have any action items here. We'll move on to 9F, which is also yours, Dave.
This item is the purchase contract for the KMPUD power transformer. We received 4 bids for this power transformer. Our evaluation shows that all 4 bids met the technical specifications. The bid by Virginia Transformer included the lowest bid price and the lowest evaluated losses. By the way, the bids ranged from a base bid price of $318,000 low for Virginia up to $449,000 for Delta Star. It is a pretty straightforward bid. We recommended staff to award the bid to Virginia Transformer. Our evaluation was based on the bid price, as I mentioned, of $318,000. We recommend the district submit a purchase order by December 20th this month, as Virginia Transformer has offered a discounted price of $297,000, a $19,000 discount, or $20,000 discount if we can meet that date. We see no reason why, if the board does award this, that staff should not be able to issue that purchase order. The engineer's opinion of probable cost for the transformer was $400,000. So with that said, basically, we're just recommending award the contract to Virginia.
And I should have read the agenda item, but 9F is the discussion and possible approval of procurement agreement for the KMPUD substation project, specifically 34.5 kilovolts to 12.5 kilovolts power transformer in relation to the district's Out Valley power line project. So with that, I'll open up to any questions from the board or comments from the board. Questions, comments from the audience? Michael, do you have a staff recommendation?
Yes, based on the bids received and the engineer's estimate, staff recommends the board approve the contract to Virginia Transformer.
For the $279,000 to take advantage of the discount opportunity?
Has arrived.
I believe it was 297, right?
297.
297.
Well, I'd like to
Hey,
move.
Dave, Palmer's on.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave. We're on agenda item 9F, so we're not quite ready for you, but we'll be soon.
Oh, sorry, okay.
So I'd like to move acceptance of the Virginia bid.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. So here's where we're going to change up the agenda a bit. We're going to defer to another meeting, 9G, which is presentation.
Has arrived.
Who just arrived?
Victor Urzic, so we have Dave
Has
Farmer
left the conference.
and Victor online, and Dave Farmer just left, and Michelle Gamble. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, and enjoy your holiday.
Happy holidays.
Thanks.
Welcome, Victor. This is Standish O'Grady. I am the new president, I guess, of the board, and we're going to get to you shortly. But before we do, I think we're going to defer on the financial reconciliation, operational condition, and warranty requirements of the wastewater treatment plant, which is agenda item 9G. And then 9H and I, we may come back to, time permitting. And 9J, we're going to defer on. That's discussion and possible approval of Ordinance 1304, adopting developers agreement, connection permit, and related procedures and requirement for new development and construction projects. So with that, I think we'll move to agenda item 9K, excuse me, to
No, you're right.
That's right.
9K. So it's the Mello-Roos topic and the involves a public hearing. Michael, do you want to get started with a PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
The board can go ahead and open the public hearing at this point on this matter.
Okay, I, Standish O'Grady, KMPUD Board President, hereby open the public meeting to discuss and possibly approve an amendment to the special tax formula of Community Facilities District number 98-01. Is that what I'm supposed to do, Dave?
Perfect, Stan.
And well-trained.
As the board is aware, the district has been working with KCP lately on a revision to the district's Mello-Roos bond, Community Facilities District's 8901, for nearly 2 years. The Mello-Roos bond was established in 1998 to fund $6.2 million in improvements to the wastewater treatment plant, to hopefully expand this plant to accommodate build-out. All undeveloped land at the time was included in the offering, including several large parcels which included both ski and developable land. It was contemplated in the original documents that only developable land would be included in the revision after the specific plan was completed, but this was never accomplished. With the sale of the ski hill to Vail, a condition of the purchase was to remove the Mello-Roos liability off of the ski hill. Working with Dave Fama, our bond counsel, and Victor Urzic of Goodman Consulting, the team has developed a mechanism to revise the rates and methods of apportionment, or methodology, such that the assessment on undeveloped property is based on proposed residential development unit rather than the number of acres. Today, Victor Urzic is with us to go over the revision of the rates and methods of apportionment. And Dave Fama will be going over the collateral agreement and the indemnity agreement, and then go through the process needed for this transaction. But first, Chairman Emdy We'll go through the district's initial conditions and ground rules.
Before you do, Michael, you said it's for residential development, but it's also for commercial too, no?
Yes.
Okay. The slide we're looking at is district role, and this describes a little bit about what we were trying to accomplish as we got involved with KCP and Vail on the potential revision of the RMA and the Melrose district. So the approach that we took was starting pretty simply with saying that the transaction envisioned is between KCP and Vail, and that it therefore should not impact any other Melrose participant in the valley, i.e. the individual homeowner who's already there and is paying a certain amount of money, about $783 a year of Melrose taxes, and certainly there should be no change to what the individuals see in the end product. The second bullet here is probably the one that we spent the most time talking about, and that is that the district is financially secure with this change. I'm sure Nate would like to say how his perception of my conservatism has impressed him as we have gone through this, and certainly we pushed hard for a lot of assurance that this transaction would go smoothly, and that if anything was problematic, that there were adequate protections in place for PUD and the ratepayers and the community at large. KCP, of course, is a new and as yet untested company in this picture. They're operating for the first time in the valley, separate from their historical role as operator of the resort, and therefore we asked for significant and tangible assurances that KCP would be able to meet its financial obligations under a restructured Melrose district. We also recognize that Vail is a sound public corporation with a correspondingly high likelihood that it will be able to meet its obligations. However, during the negotiations, a couple of things came to the table that I want to mention because they could put additional financial responsibilities onto KCP. First and foremost in that list is that Vail has reserved an unrestricted option to transfer developable units from the 4 development properties that they are retaining to KCP, and that's a total of 142 developable units, so it's potentially a significant additional obligation that could fall onto KCP's plate should Vail firm up their development plans. And second, Vail negotiated not to be subject to a new backup tax that we incorporated into the picture, and the backup tax is there specifically to protect in the very unlikely event that the normal tax levy process is not sufficient to generate funds to service the Melrose bonds. So considering all of these factors, the Planning Committee incorporated 3 protective elements into the Melrose restructure plan that are really the pointed bullet 2 there. And in summary terms, those are that KCP will provide additional collateral monies, $472,000, which will backstop their Melrose obligations. That is pretty fundamentally 2 years of the new Melrose tax liabilities that KCP is taking on or could take on as the result of lot line adjustments, or if Vail decides to transfer DUs to KCP in the future. The release mechanism for those monies will be that money will come out of the cash pool as KCP develops properties, and specifically the trigger on the release will be predicated on completion of projects, which is different than it has been in the past. It's always been on final map. In this case, it's written as either KCP gets a property to certificate of occupancy, or a third party to whom KCP sells the property gets it to certificate of occupancy. Therefore, the trigger is on projects finished, not on projects started. The final 2 elements of financial protection are a cross-collateralization agreement between KCP and KMPUD. The fundamental nature of that agreement is that if KCP had a default on any one property, all the properties are cross-collateralized. That would constitute a default on all of the KCP properties and potentially a foreclosure on all of the properties. And the last point, which is mentioned up there, actually this third sub-bullet, there is an indemnification agreement between KCP and KMPUD that states that KCP will protect KMPUD in the unlikely event that there is legal action by Mello-Roos bondholders, either when the restructuring is announced or as time passes. And the KCP collateral monies posted will be available should such defense be required. Let's see, that gets us down to district not exposed to out-of-pocket costs. So KCP has graciously been paying the legal counsel's bills as we've worked through this topic. And lastly, all outstanding KCP receivables paid in full. There were a few loose ends that needed to be tidied up that were still outstanding after the transaction between KMR and Vail, and we got all of those successfully resolved, which is a good thing. And I think those are the objectives as I wanted to cover them.
Great. Now we have Victor Erzik from Goodwin's Consulting, who has worked tirelessly on this project. Victor, I know that Bob hit some of the key points. If there's, I'm going to flip to the structure, and if there's anything he missed out, please enlighten us.
The main thrust of the changes to RMA have to do with the way the tax is levied on undeveloped property. And it went from an acreage-based tax to a unit-based tax. And the parcels that are proposed to be developed, there are 17 undeveloped parcels with varying amounts of units that are proposed. They're based on the number of expected units. That is, the tax is based on the number of expected units for each of those parcels. I'll touch on bullet point number 3 there. In terms of the position for the bondholders, with this proposed change, the position for the bondholders has improved. Number one, because there are now 2 major property owners out there. So the risk of default has been spread among 2 property owners now. And in addition, there's the collateral agreement of $472,000 there, which acts as an additional reserve fund on future tax levies. And also, the tax rates are more aligned with the properties that are going to develop, and therefore it's a little, because these properties will be more valuable in the future due to the proposed developments on them, the taxes are aligned more with the property values there. We did touch on transferring of units, as was mentioned. KCP properties, if they want to transfer units, they need to get district approval. Vail does not. The backup tax, this is a tax of approximately $1,900 per unit. And in terms of when that kicks in, first the tax is levied on developed parcels out there. If not enough revenues can be generated from taxing just developed property, the next step is to tax final map property. The third step is, again, if enough tax cannot be generated, then the tax is levied on undeveloped property. And then finally, if that does not generate enough taxes, in addition to developed and final map tax levies, then the backup tax kicks in. And not expected we'll ever need to use this. Up to this point, developed property has always generated enough tax to cover the levy. And next slide then. This map of Kirkwood Mountain Resort, all the colored areas basically delineate the undeveloped properties as they currently are. And these are taxed based on the current RMA. The areas in light blue are the areas that are proposed to be taxed under the new rate method, or the revised rate method of apportionment. So the areas in red, yellow, and green there would drop out of the taxable property. So it basically goes from approximately slide, that's kind of a summary of the map there. First column, you see all the parcel numbers, the map ID numbers, a description of the properties. Column over is ownership, and then the designation. And the taxable properties are designated as future development properties. And the number of expected units for each of those properties is shown in the column to the far right. A total of 474 expected units are proposed to be developed on those properties. And if we go down to the next slide, we were asked to take a look at the proposed levies. Well, actually, for fiscal year 2012-13, we have the actual levy, and this is, if you look toward the middle of that table, the middle column, we show the actual tax levy on those undeveloped properties for fiscal year 2012-13, and then the column over shows the comparison under this revised RMA. And you can see that some properties, their tax goes down to zero. These are the ones that have been designated exempt, or C property, which is also exempt. And all other properties, their taxes will go up. If you take a look toward the very bottom of the actual levy, you see that for Kirkwood Capital Partners, their properties that they own, they were levied a total tax of about $47,000 in fiscal year 12-13. For the Vail-owned properties, their tax is just under $236,000, and the total undeveloped property tax for that year was a little over $283,000. The tax on developed property, final map property, was $194,000, and so the total levy came to just over $477,000. And as you look again over to the proposed tax levy based on this revised RMA, again toward the bottom of that column, you'll see that Kirkwood Capital Partners, under the proposed tax levy, will pay about $184,000. Vail's tax levy will be reduced just under $100,000. And again, for developed and final map property, it stays the same. Again, this revision to the RMA does not affect the existing developed properties and final map properties, so their tax will be the same. And then a few columns over, you can see what the current maximum tax is under the current RMA. If you look toward the bottom of that column, it comes to $901,000. The column over shows the proposed maximum tax levy. It's just under $1 million, so we actually increased the amount of taxes that can be levied on undeveloped properties. So that again is security for the bondholders.
With that, should we ask Dave Fama to comment on the legal agreements? No.
Yes, so Dave will be here to talk about our credit enhancements and the procedures moving forward.
Sure, thank you. So it's already been mentioned, but I'll just go over it again briefly. Let me preface it by saying that when this district was originally put together, the community facility district was originally put together, the KMPUD, the Kirkwood district, reserved the right, so to speak, to make amendments to the RMA. At that time, I think there was a conversation that there would be some changes to the specific plan and so forth. So this is something that is within your power to do, and it was written into the document for the formation of the district as well as for the issuance of the bond. So in other words, bondholders were told at the time that they bought the bond that you had the right to come in and rearrange the tax exactly in the manner that we're doing. So as an extra layer of protection for the district against any claim, primarily by the bondholders, the district is going one step further and having the Kirkwood folks enter into two agreements. One's a collateral agreement and one's an indemnification agreement. First, the collateral agreement actually has three components in it. The three have been mentioned by Bob, and I think Victor touched upon it as well. The first one is deposit of cash that's being put into an escrow fund in the amount of $472,000. That would remain there. It's to be used if and when there's a shortfall on the payment of special taxes on undeveloped property. This is regardless of whether Kirkwood owns it in the future or not. So if they transfer it, you still have the escrow in place. The trigger for releasing funds is development of the property, which I think was mentioned before. So that's a pretty good cushion. This is in addition to the reserve fund that was created for the bonds out of bond proceeds when the bonds were issued, which would be something that would be a go-to source of funds as well in the event that special taxes create a shortfall for debt service. So number one is the escrow deposit. Number two is the cross-collateralization that was mentioned previously, and that is the cross-collateralization among all the properties owned by the various Kirkwood entities. There's currently 4 of them going into this agreement. Sure. And if there's a default on the one, you have the right under the Melrose law to foreclose the property and sell it to get taxes paid. We've extended that out that not only would you have the right to foreclose on the property to which the tax is related, you have the right to foreclose on all the properties owned by any KCP entity. So that's another layer there. And then the third layer is it overlaps the indemnity agreement itself, but it's an indemnification that's written into the collateral agreement that it was intended to cover you for any expenses, any claims made in connection with the collateral agreement itself, but we've expanded it to also cover just in general the restructuring, bondholders, etc. That is the overlap part because you've got a separate indemnity agreement that is being entered into by the Kirkwood folks that its sole purpose is to provide indemnification to the district from any claims by anyone. They would primarily be bondholders saying that somehow restructuring has put the ability to pay debt service in jeopardy. So none of those things were required. It's extra measures that you took, which were good, and as Bob said, conservative, which is good. I believe the Kirkwood folks have signed or are ready to sign the 2 agreements and have the deposit either in Michael's hands or about to. And if you approve the structure, this would be part and parcel of it. I think that's about it, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have one for Dave, which is, I just want to confirm, I think you said that if KCP sells or loses the property, we still hold on to the collateral until there's a certificate of occupancy on that?
Yeah, well, remember the collateral agreement has the 2 aspects in it, the cross-collateralization via foreclosure and the escrow. The cross-collateralization would not remain if they sell the property, which kind of makes sense in terms of someone else owning it. But the escrow dollars, the $472,000, does remain regardless of whether they sell the property or not. And for Kirkwood-owned property, it's a certificate of occupancy that would trigger a partial release, and we have a formula for that is how much would be released. So certificate of occupancy on a Kirkwood entity's properties, a building permit on a Vail entity's properties.
Great. You had some
That's your release.
No, that's exactly the point.
One other item, the cash collateral amount of $472,000 was arrived at taking the total undeveloped liability, which you saw on the previous page, as $283,000, less the current KCP liability, because we were looking at incremental new liability, multiplied by 2, which basically gives us time in order to foreclose on a delinquent property, equals the $472,000, and that's how that number got derived. And with that, I'll swing it back over to Chairman Andy for his conclusion and recommendation.
My conclusion is that after a lot of work on this, we've come up with a very logical structure which should make as much sense to the bondholders as it makes to all of us, understanding how things are really being done in the valley, where developments will be, and not having taxable property spread either in the all over ski hills and other things that didn't make a lick of sense. I think we have addressed the the financial aspects of this with a great deal of care, and KMPUD's interests are well protected in the recommendation as you have seen it described today. I certainly do recommend, as does the planning committee, that we move forward with this restructuring, and I support it completely. Great.
And for the board members, we're still in the public hearing, and see if there's any public comments and close that.
Are there any public comments or questions? So we should close the public hearing, is that what you said, Dave?
Correct.
What about if board members want to ask a question? I do, naturally.
Dave, should board members ask questions before or after closing the public hearing?
After.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Then I stand to show Grady hereby close the public hearing. So with that, we'll turn it over to board questions. Sounds like you've got one or two.
Yeah, I have a couple. This is kind of complicated for me. Now,
Me too.
If I understand this correctly, there's no exchange of actual property, it's exchange of assessments, is that correct?
Correct. The way that the Mello-Roos tax works is that there was an additional tax, in addition to property taxes, there was an additional, what we call a special tax that was put on all these parcels back in 1998 when the district was put together. And each property is assigned a certain dollar amount of the maximum tax that they can be charged in any 1 year. So what we've done is we've adjusted the maximum tax upward or downward on undeveloped property in order for the dollar amount of the tax on that property to correspond with the future developable units that can be put on the property. And that relates more closely to what the purpose of the CFD was when it was originally put together. And it doesn't make sense to have a fee hill tax for wastewater treatment facilities when the fee hill doesn't generate wastewater. So we've kind of realigned the tax to match the purpose at this point. The switching is of the maximum dollar amount that can be levied against each property that was affected. It has nothing to do with changing ownership. That was done between KCP and Vail in the past, and the tax just moves with the ownership.
Yeah, Peter, this action doesn't change ownership of properties. There's no exchange of properties here whatsoever.
Because there was a note on 25A saying that there was going to be a proposed change.
There are two parcels that are under discussion to be transferred between Vail and KCP. That's not directly relevant to the Mello-Roos restructuring. It's just a transaction that has been discussed by Vail and KCP and is not yet completed. So that's what the footnote is there to indicate.
Okay, so my understanding of the Mello-Roos is that certain properties were assigned what we call sewer units or developable hookups. Is that relevant? I mean, if you...
Absolutely, yes.
So if you're transferring assessments to KCP, I would assume they're getting hookups, additional hookups. Is that correct?
Well, so let's start at the beginning. I think what we've set up here is a pattern that says, here are individual developable parcels. We understand where they are, and we understand how many developable units are assigned to each one, so that KMPUD could look at that, of course, and assess its feasibility from a utilities perspective.
Well, it was based on a total number of allowable hookups.
Yes,
sewer units or
this
whatever.
matches the specific plan exactly.
So essentially, if KCP is acquiring new levies, they're going to be acquiring additional sewer units. Is that correct, or is that incorrect?
Acquiring new levies.
No, it's just,
Well, you're transferring assessments.
it's taking assessments on property that we're never going to have connections.
What,
And putting that assessment onto the properties that always were going to have connections.
Yeah.
So
it's
what are
right-
they
so
getting
it's-
for
so it's
their
become-
additional assessment?
So it's become rational. Basically, it's become rational. No, I think KCP was let's just take parcel, whatever it is, 10.88 acres, 006, 010, 095. They were always going to try to develop something like 105 units on it.
Right.
But they were only paying an assessment based on acreage, not based on number of units. So this makes it according to number of units.
Right.
So it rationalizes the whole thing.
I think the question that's been get at is, why was this done at all? And I think the reason is rationalizing this was part of the original transaction for the sale of the ski resort. And that was an obligation that we agreed to assist with as long as no other property owners were adversely affected. So it doesn't create any more developer units. It just rationalizes the tax to be in the proper place.
And I don't think it transfers developable units or what you're calling sewer units.
Well,
It's all consistent with the
that's-
specific
yeah,
plan.
right.
Yeah, no, there has to be a provision, and there is, for future swap of developable units between parcels if need comes to us one day and says, oh, I've got 30 on this plot and I've got 20 on that plot and I really want to make it 25 and 25. Are you guys okay with that? Then there has to be an advise and consult, and there's language in there that says we would not unreasonably withhold the approval of making such a move. But of course, our interest in that would be, can we actually service it if it was done 25 and 25 instead of what's in these documents? And we would have to look at it and say, yeah, there's no problem with getting the sewer hookups done in that physical pattern and providing electricity and so on.
So Vail's not losing any connections. They're not acquired. I know I'm repeating myself. I just want to clarify.
Yeah, Vail reserves the right to give their connections away to KCP, but they're not losing any connections off of this.
By paying less.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Because they were paying more because they were paying for ski land.
Right. Okay.
Previously, the tax was calculated on a per acre basis, so if you had a 100-acre parcel, you're going to pay a lot of tax. It didn't make any sense because the 100 acres had no, toilets on it, or however you want to put it.
Use the trees.
We used to. Any more questions, Peter?
Yeah. What year is the bond due to be retired? Does anybody know?
It's,
I could look if you give me a minute. I don't
Sure.
know.
And how much is remaining?
2029, I think it's 2029, 14 years? Yeah, I did all this math.
It's 15 years from now.
Yeah, it's 15 years, 2029.
And you don't know what the outstanding debt is?
I know all of this, actually.
4.9.
4.9, a little bit less, 4.7.
And that's an obligation that's only payable from the special tax levy on the various properties. It's not an obligation of KMPUD.
Correct. Okay, I understand that.
Any other questions, Peter?
This is maybe just the double asterisk pursuant to the RMA. This parcel is applicable to transfer 25A. Do you have any plans on that you'd like to share with us tonight? 25A. I'm looking. My assumption is that that Vail is going to sell you part of that parcel back. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Vail is going to keep, so that entire large parcel
Right.
north of the highway is a single parcel as it stands today.
Right.
And to the comment Bob made earlier, Vail are interested in the commercial component of that, and we are interested in the residential component of that. So
Okay.
part of our agreement with Vail is that we're going to subdivide that parcel such that they can take the commercial piece and we can take what's zoned as residential.
But that does, it's all in line with what was identified in the specific plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the number of DUs north of 88 has come up any number of times when we've had this discussion. I think that shows on the schedule there, and it's 25 plus.
It's 40 amongst
40
the three properties.
Total.
Yeah, 40 amongst the three.
Okay, so there's no changes to the specific plan by us approving this?
I think what this really does is it helps us, particularly in an effort like the planning committee, where we're trying to envision what is the valley going to look like at full build out. Something like this is actually strongly in support of that because we know which parcels are by intent going to have how many developed units, and it starts to paint the picture in a much more detailed way than the Melrose structure did before. So I think it's helpful to making sure that our planning is good.
Okay, that's pretty much all I have.
Bob?
I just want to go back and discuss the other property owners other than Vail and Kirkwood Capital Partners. So the resolution is kind of silent. It just says if you're not on the list, you're not affected. But can we positively comment on what effect it has on everybody else?
Everybody else, meaning the existing Melrose?
The other property owners in Kirkwood that are subject to this Melrose.
The RMA actually specifically shows the land classes and the Melrose tax per land class, and that it matches the current Melrose tax.
Okay, but the resolution that we're going to be asked to adopt doesn't say that at all.
So the resolution makes a reference to the rate method of apportionment, be amended and restated, which is the subject of what we're doing here. And in that rate method of apportionment, as amended, it actually says it, but if you were to read it and interpret it, you would find that properties that are developed are unaffected.
Would it be possible?
You wouldn't, but you wouldn't find that in the resolution. You'd only find it if you read through the documents. Is that
Would it be
correct?
possible to add, after the second whereas, this is resolution 1330, right?
Yes.
So after the second whereas, where the second whereas says, whereas the property is affected by increased special taxes resulting from the proposed amended and restated rate and method of apportionment of special tax are set forth in Exhibit A here too, affected territory, whereas all other properties remain unaffected.
And that's my question. Is that a true statement?
It is a true statement.
Well, under the RMA, there's an Exhibit 2, Attachment 2, which has all the parcel numbers that are not affected.
It is true.
Okay.
It is
Still no
true
list.
of the current homeowners who are in the Melrose district.
The big history on this, we originally had drafted this RMA to apply only to the properties whose tax was increased or decreased. And then we got to the point where we were kind of concerned that we would basically have the two RMAs out there that kind of looked exactly the same. So we went from calling it a supplement to the original to calling it a replacement, amended and restated. So the original will fall away now, and this is the new RMA. When we did that, we needed to include all the parcels in the district rather than just the parcels that had a tax that was going up or down. But the effect of it is that all the properties that are developed are
Okay.
the exact.
And you also talked about a special tax assessment that we don't expect to use in case of a shortfall. Does that affect the other properties?
Okay, so here's the summary. I think in the
not levied on the existing property owners.
this is subtlety that maybe you're intending to draw out of this, or maybe you're just finding it by hazard.
Whatever makes me look smarter is the right.
Yeah, it's the latter. So the existing homeowners pay exactly what they have been paying all along. However, we want to say that in the resolution or whatever, I'm fine with that. But if there is somebody who is not yet a homeowner because maybe hasn't developed the property and they're going to buy it 3 years from now, they are not offered that protection because they would be subject to the backup tax.
If they bought from KCP, if they buy from Vail, they're not subject to the backup tax.
So they could pay more than $783, but those are future homeowners, not current homeowners.
So my only reason to bring all this up is I don't know that we've done the best possible job of letting current homeowners know that this has no negative financial effect on them.
To respond to that, I would be, of course, more than happy to put in another whereas in the resolution that makes it crystal clear that current homeowners are not.
Well, I would suggest either that, but if nobody's likely to read that, however we document this in the newsletter somewhere else, that we start.
I think the chairman of the communications committee probably should.
Maybe he could
Well,
confirm.
let rather
Yeah,
than consult with the
delegate.
finance committee and come to a common
We'll delegate it to his co-chair and
People probably don't know their APNs, but the Exhibit A to the resolution has the list of properties that are going to be increased, and there's a, there are clauses like that, but
Yeah, I think the documents are fairly well written, but they're not necessarily as straightforward or obvious for the average homeowner.
sure, sure.
And
Well, I would suggest that we put it up on our website, meaning if I were in your shoes, I assume you're probably paying Melrose taxes, and I think you'd probably want to look on attachment 2, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but this basically says,
Attachment 3, it contains the parcels that are not affected by the changes to the rate method.
that's attachment 2 or 3?
3. There was a new RMA circulated this morning, and that one
Oh, okay.
we attached.
I'd love a copy of the presentation too, please. Thank you. Okay. So this attachment 3, I mean, presumably somebody like Bob should be able to look on there, look on his tax bill.
I don't think we're being very friendly to the other property owners in suggesting, figure out your parcel number, go to the second hearing, and look up and see if you're affected. Is it possible to just say the only affected parties are undeveloped properties currently owned by either Vail or KCP? No other properties, no other currently assessed properties are affected?
We should say that.
Okay, that would save everybody else a lot of time to find out if you're affected, just follow this 3-step procedure.
Well, and probably not using the APNs would be beneficial because most people don't know their APNs, but if you named the 4 Kirkwood entities and Heavenly Valley Limited Partnership, and say that the only affected parcels are those owned by, Kirkwood 1, 2, 3, 4, and Heavenly Valley.
Yeah.
And that's pretty clear.
My request would be some way of communicating something easier to understand, either in the whereas or in the actual communication, assuming we adopt this.
We could put this map on the website.
I would suggest a paragraph in the next newsletter would be more friendly than another whereas.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but I would want to check with communication.
Could you possibly confer with the finance committee as well?
I would.
Okay.
So we're on agenda item 9L. Are there any other comments or questions from the board?
Well, I think I'd like to comment on Bob's due diligence of working through this on all of our behalves. I mean, it's very clear now, and I think it's a great job.
It was very clear on the page.
It is.
Certainly a more complicated topic than I anticipated.
But am I correct in assuming that the communications committee, which has beat this to death unanimously, the planning committee unanimously recommends approval?
We had one member who was not in attendance, but all other members voted positively, yes.
Great.
So I guess I'm looking for a motion to approve Resolution 1330, which is a resolution of the Board of Directors authorizing amendment to the rate and method of apportionment of special tax for certain properties and submitting amended levy of tax to qualified electors. Is that what I'm looking for?
So moved.
Eric moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So passed unanimously. Congratulations. Thank you.
Now, we have other details we have to do on this. There's ballots.
Yeah, it's the next agenda item.
Which is 9M. The topic is discussion and possible approval of resolution declaring results of amendment of special tax election, determining validity of prior proceedings, approving security agreements, and directing recording of amended notice of special tax lien, Community Facilities District number 98-1.
Yeah, let the record show that the district has received special election waivers from both the KCP Group and Heavenly Valley, consenting to waivering of certain time periods and procedural items identified in the RMA with regards to the amendment of the special tax election. Furthermore, let the record show that the district has received these special election ballots from all 5 affected landowners with 100% voting in favor of this action.
And so, after we discuss it, what we're looking for is a resolution, a motion to pass resolution number 1331, which is a resolution of the Board of Directors declaring results of amendment of special tax election, determining validity of prior proceedings, approving security agreements, and directing recording of amended notice of special tax lien. So any further discussion on this at the board level?
So I'll just jump in for a minute if you don't mind and just give you a 60 seconds of background here. In order to make a change to the RMA under the Mello-Roos law, you're required to get the vote of the people whose taxes are going to be increased. And so as we just said, that Vales and Kirkwood each have parcels that are going to have an increased maximum annual special tax. So in the last resolution, you called an election, which is required, in order to see if they're in favor of it. And with this resolution, you're saying that the ballots have been turned in and you've got 100% approval, and that gives you the authority to institute the increase in the special tax over what was previous. And in the reso that's up right now, you're also conditioning going forward with the amendment on getting the signatures to your security agreements that we talked about.
Great. Any questions, comments from the community? Hearing none, I'm looking for a resolution to adopt, a motion to adopt resolution 1331.
So moved.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So that's Mello-Roos. Is there anything else on Mello-Roos?
No, thank you, David and Victor, for joining us today.
Appreciate it, gentlemen.
Thanks for all your hard work on this. Bye-bye.
So with that, I think we should probably go to item 10D, which is administration and our financial report by Jill Campbell.
I'll try and keep it short.
I just want to say welcome back, Jill.
Thank you.
And why didn't you bring Colleen?
This is the first time I've been without him. I'm a little shaky.
I hear Mello-Roos sports.
I'll start with the October balance sheet. Just a couple of notes. Our October operating cash is $2,025,000, which is about $31,000 over plan. If you look at accounts receivable, the difference between budget correlates with that. A note on restricted. The district has added a new bank account with Bank of the West for the Mello-Roos Trust. So in the future, that will be listed under restricted. The total trustee special construction, which is our RUS account, shows over plan that there was a lot of unknowns when we did the budget with timing and draws and payments. So that's why that one is over plan. Our capital reserve is the same thing. Basically on the membrane replacement project, timing on when those invoices were paid. And accounts receivable is over plan. That's due to timing also on RUS payments. Are there any questions on the balance sheet?
I'd just like to say that we had a finance committee meeting in the last week or so, and Jill went through all these, and I think we thought that things were in pretty good shape versus budget. Should have probably prefaced this presentation with that, but why don't you keep going?
I'm just going to go over the combined income statement unless there's any questions on individual departments. Our October year-to-date, or our October net loss is right in line with budget. The net loss is $126,000 and plan was $128,000. So we're very close on that. Our year-to-date net revenue is up $45,000 from plan. And our expenses are also up. So our year-to-date net loss is $35,500 over plan. A couple of notes on expenses. Our depreciation year-to-date is under budget. That's due to the membrane replacement project. We estimated that the project would be complete and had been depreciated by now, and that'll be next month, I believe. Our contract services are down due to the audit invoices. We're working on finalizing those, so those aren't posted for October. And our internal allocations are over budget due to our electric expense for our plant.
So I'm not going to ask this to be explained right now, but I'm going to ask maybe Michael or Standish or Bob to explain this to me. So I still don't understand the G&A allocations line in this entire wrap-up. It just seems to me that allocations that count somehow as an expense should be offset someplace as income as well. So it's just, unless it's just a timing thing, but it's $284,000 of the versus budget of a greater expense, which explains a lot. So don't have to explain it now, but it doesn't seem like a real cash thing to me. It seems like
it's pretty much property taxes, and I think the way that it's shown on here could be improved. But a short answer for it for now is we're now allocating property taxes on a monthly basis, and they first go to G&A.
I see.
And the only way that we can get them to other departments is to expense them. It's easier to see if you actually look at, electric, where a lot of the property taxes are going to. But I can go over that.
Yeah, like I said, because the short term, I found that one.
Well, it's not a timing thing. It's really driven by a combination of the way we budgeted G&A allocations, plus we made the decision that in order to comply with some of Russ's requirements, we'd allocate 100% of property taxes to electricity for this year. And I think it's probably a good idea to follow up on Eric's request at a future meeting, maybe with Kelly there, because she did a very good job explaining it to the Finance Committee, I thought. Is that a fair request?
Yeah.
The right way to handle it? Why don't you keep going, Jill?
There has been requests to see statistical information on these income statements, and we have contacted PCS, and unfortunately they're saying that it's not possible. We're trying to show kilowatt hours compared to budget, propane cubic feet compared to budget, so we are creating a separate spreadsheet that at the next board meeting you'll be able to review showing that information. It just can't be included on here.
And I guess I'd just like to say for the audience who doesn't have this data up, your district's pretty healthy. Right now we have $2.0 million of cash, which is $30,000 ahead of budget, and our revenues through October are $1.7 million, $45,000 ahead of budget. And as Jill said, we're $35,000 worse on the net income line, entering the most important part of our operating season, namely winter. Anything else from the board on financial report?
No, I think you went over the cash waterfall.
Why don't you do that?
Okay. At the end of December, our actual operating cash balance was $1,931,000, which is $75,000 better than planned. Our low is still anticipated to be December. Our anticipated cash balance in December is going to be $1,549,000, which is $52,000 over plan. So
Again, this is just in our general fund as opposed to the other funds that we have.
correct. Unless there's any questions on financials, I just wanted to make one statement on the audit. We did finish our audit with AKT this year, and staff discussed with the Finance Committee. We'd like to go out for an RFP for the audit for next year and future years. We do have a few concerns with AKT, mainly costs. We received our final invoices and they are over contract, which happened last year, and we thought we'd resolve that. So we are going to send out an RFP before the end of this month. It doesn't mean we can't use AKT. We just want to see what else is out there. The last time that we mailed an RFP, it was later on in the year, so we didn't get a very good pool of companies. So if we do it now, we're hoping that we can see what else is out there for trust compliance.
Anything else in financials? Good. Well, then, Michael, we have sort of an as time allows section. And it says that we might talk about 9H rate strategy, but 15 to 20 minutes. I think maybe 5. Would you maybe like to talk to the board and the community about what we're going to try to accomplish
Sure.
in the next meeting or two, and to, invite anybody who's interested in participating? And then the other thing I'd like to do is just have Brandy give an update on electricity and propane, because I'm sure the board and community are interested in that.
Great. Let's, Brandy, you want to go first?
Sure.
So to update you on the status of the powerhouse, we have been running Volvos normally since the completion of the fuel repairs in October. As a result of this, we have seen an increase in our kilowatt hour per gallon number. We've not yet made it to 14 on any month, but we were up to 13.63 kilowatt hours per gallon in November. We have been running Volvos more than normal for us because we have one of the cats that's being worked on currently by Holta, California, doing some warranty repairs. And we're also just trying to get our numbers up to meet our budget there. We are expecting snowmaking to continue for the next few days. They have been focusing on Chair 6, and we've been running around the clock if temperatures allow. We've seen a high of 2,500 kilowatts for this time period when the resort is making snow. We've also been spending time focusing on our renewable portfolio standard requirements. We purchased 7,500 RECs for $1 a piece, which was lower than I reported we expected to pay for them. And we expect to use those to comply with the 2011 all the way through 2016 RPS requirements. In other emissions news, the cap and trade auction in November, we were able to participate in that auction. And because we anticipate, based on our loads throughout the year and MU historical loads, not to have a cap and trade obligation for this year, we auctioned off 2,933 allowances and for a profit of $33,670, which is allotted to stabilizing electric rates and making sure that no increases are seen to customers because of regulations. We finished our propane leak project for this summer, totaling approximately 76 leaks completed this summer, including all of the grade 2 leaks. And we've started pulling our crews back to indoor activities, generator maintenance, and other winter activities.
That was 76 leaks.
That was 76 leaks. It was quite a few leaks in an effort to make sure all the propane that goes into our system comes out somebody's meter.
That's good. Any questions or comments for Brandy?
I think it'd be a good idea to document either on the website or on a statement comments that we're doing what percentage renewables the customers are currently seeing. And I don't know if we ever want to consider if a customer wanted to be 100% renewable, it'd be pretty cheap. I don't know if we want to offer that.
Right. It would be very cheap, like $1.
Right, and we would count that toward ours. Yeah, our target. So certainly cheaper than solar panels.
Yeah. Buying RECs, they're cheap.
Yep, well, They're dirt
$1
cheap.
each.
Yeah.
We thought they were going to be $1.50, and then a year ago they were $11.
So Michael, we have 2 minutes for your,
Sure. So I did prepare a presentation to the board, but we'll look at it on December 23rd. So district staff is preparing a presentation to the board to discuss the goals and organization of the rate strategy workshop planned for December 23rd at 2 p.m. here at the Community Services Building. This is an open and public meeting, and the Finance Committee has also been invited to attend. The intent of this workshop is to establish a clear set of goals and strategy for our rates and for our enterprise departments moving forward. The Finance Committee has been invited. The presentation to the board will start off with what are established strategic goals. We'll move on to potential rate strategy goals, which I've developed, and we'll discuss how property tax amounts, how much they are and how they have been used in the past, and how they might be used in the future. Discuss the 6 enterprise funds, the rate history, the recent operational performance, their capital needs, and the current debt service. We'll show the history and the needs of the governmental services. We'll talk about connection fees and how that has an impact on operations. The intent is to get the board and committee primed for the workshop, and to come up with some strategic goals for rate strategy in the future.
great. Any questions for Michael on that?
Sounds like it'll be a good session.
So I guess my only concluding comments are, I think we're entering the ski season with a state-of-the-art, fully functional powerhouse, finally. A state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant that's been through a very successful upgrade. We're in good financial shape. I think that's about it. Oh, and we have an Out Valley project that's about as on schedule as we could expect at this point. Thank you, Eric, for all that.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Unless there's anything else, we'll adjourn the meeting.